Week 1 of Chiefs training camp, an abbreviated week, but a week nonetheless, is in the books, and the pads come on tomorrow. But before we get there, I wanted to take a time out to go over the top 10 winners of Week 1 of Chiefs training camp, and we have to start where we have to start. The obvious winner of Week 1 is Tyquan Thornton, a guy who basically everyone had written off of the team prior to camp, has been excelling, has been showing it on the field. Here he is in his RAS glory, an 8.56 score, 6'2" and 3/10, 181 pounds, which is not great. A 10-foot, 10-inch broad jump scores a 9.62 out of 10. But here is where the money will be made. A 4.28 40-yard dash is elite, scoring 9.96 out of 10. The 20-yard split is elite as well with a 2.46, which scores 9.97 out of 10. But the really impressive part is this 10-yard split of 1.41, eating any type of gap that the corner leaves pre-snap. That 1.41 scores a 9.99 out of 10. Look, speed guys always look good in camp, and especially before the pads come on, but there is a spot for the run real fast guy in Andy Reid's offense, and Tyquan Thornton appears to be doing it very well. I think that he will not have to be on the field as much as was Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Marquez Valdes-Scantling kind of washed out here in Kansas City. I thought that he was promising when the Chiefs signed him, but it turned out not to be quite that promising after all. Tyquan Thornton not having to be on the field as much will probably, in my opinion, be one of the guys who shines occasionally. You see there a 33 1/8 inch arm length, which allows him to be a big target downfield, bigger than his 6'2" frame really suggests. Thornton did wash out in New England, but after the team spent a second-round pick on him, but Brett Veach has never met a bargain that he did not like. He could be Tyquan Thornton here in Kansas City, one of the guys that comes onto the field in a rotation, and really sort of stands out, really lets Mahomes open things up. He seemingly has won the trust, or at least the curiosity, of Patrick Mahomes, and Mahomes has the cannon necessary to make a guy like Tyquan Thornton dangerous, allowing the offense, even when Xavier Worthy and or Hollywood Brown are not on the field, to have an extreme deep threat is something that should let this offense open things up, not just in the passing game, but in the running game, as he is able to take a safety out of the box on a play-by-play basis. So the running game for this team will probably be facing a lot of light boxes, which obviously that's not going to show up on the stat sheet for Tyquan Thornton, but it will show up on the stat sheet, in my opinion, for guys like Kareem Hunt and Isaiah Pacheco, as they have a veritable wall on the interior in Kingsley Suamataia, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith, obviously, to open things up in the middle. If those guys can climb and get one linebacker out of the play, all of a sudden there is a whole lot of space opened up on that defense for the running game. Number two, so there's, I think, 3 wide receivers on this list. There's a tight end on this list. There's 3 offensive linemen on this list. Offense is hot and heavy this point in training camp, and that is exactly what the Chiefs want. But number 2 is Nikko Remigio. You see that RAS score of 4.89. You see only one elite number, which is bench press, 19 reps, for a guy who weighs 187 pounds. He is a workhorse. Nikko Remigio is a guy who can, in my opinion, really change things in a small way for the team on offense, but in a big way, on special teams. This is his profile so far: 6 targets, 2 receptions, 48 yards, a 24-yard per reception average. A lot of it, all of it, and it's not a lot, in wash time for the Kansas City Chiefs. But the real value here is in the return game. You see him with 11 punt returns for 104 yards in the regular season. Punt return average is something that is going away in the NFL, as is kick return average. But if you can get a team to recognize a threat on the punt return, on the kick return game, it really could sort of mean better field position for the offense. And if Nikko Remigio gets his hands on the ball in those punt return situations, he has proven that he can be dangerous. He also has 11 kick returns for 295 yards, a 26.8 return or yards per return average. That is good as well. But where he really stood out was in the playoffs, where he had 3 punt returns for 57 yards, a 19-yard average, 10 kick returns for 301 yards, a 30.1 yard average. That is stepping it up where it matters most. That is putting it on the line against the best teams in the league, and Nikko Remigio proved that he can do that. He's a guy that proves there is more to the return game. It is more difficult than, hey, let's put a fast guy back there. He is a wily and crafty runner with the ball in his hands, and that is showing on the field in the postseason where it matters most. Now, Nikko Remigio might not be the greatest wide receiver who ever lived, but when you're filling out a roster, you want somebody at that bottom part of the roster that can catch the ball, that you know will catch the ball, that you know will get the first down. Nikko can be that guy. He can be that guy for this offense. As he won't be the number one wide receiver, neither will he be going against cornerbacks, number one cornerbacks. And he's going to be going against guys who are further down on the depth chart, and he can win those matchups. So having someone on the field that can win those matchups, again, I don't think that it will translate to, he's not going to be a 1,000-yard receiver. But if he can get, over the course of a season, a few first downs, that's all this offense needs. This wide receiver core has been absolutely decimated by injury and lack of explosiveness in the past. And Nikko might not be the most explosive guy, but he is a guy that could be counted on to move the chains. And keeping Patrick Mahomes on the field is not what opposing defenses want to do. Now, the one of 2 defensive players on this list is Chamarri Conner. You see him here with an RAS score of 9.16. This is a guy that, frankly, I forget about all the time, and I shouldn't. He is playing more than I realized, but 20 reps on the bench press, scores 8.89 out of 10. 40.5-inch vertical leap, scores a 9.63, 10-foot 5-inch broad jump, scores an 8.37, has a good 40-yard dash. You see him here listed as safety. He's playing cornerback right now for the Kansas City Chiefs. A 4.51 speed at cornerback isn't all that great, but it scored 8.12 out of 10 for safeties with a 1.56 10-yard split, which is good for an 8.26 score. Again, not a great score for a corner, but he is not going to be playing exclusively corner for the Kansas City Chiefs, in my opinion. With Kristian Fulton sidelined, Conner has stepped into that slot role. He has the athleticism to win in that spot, and this looks to be the season he'll be counted on to do so. He's going to have to dance or turn the music off at this point, and it seems that he is dancing. Conner is a utility guy for the defensive back room. He's playing cornerback right now, but with Brian Cook in the final year of his contract, Conner may be a safety in the future. You see his stats right here. 16 starts. I frankly did not realize he was playing that much. He had 2 interceptions last season, which he returned for 32 yards, 4 pass deflections. He has 113 tackles thus far on his career, with a sack in there as well. 4 quarterback hits last year, and 6 total tackles for loss. If he's in that slot position, he's going to be counted on to have a lot more tackles for loss, and I think he can get them. You see his snap counts here. Last year, he played 573 snaps of defense, which is more than I realized he had played. Played in 15 out of 17 games. You see here, his rookie year, he played 330 snaps of special teams. That fell to 187 last year, as he was counted on more for the defense in general. And that is probably the way his career is going to trend, is playing more and more defense. But Kristian Fulton will come back, right? Hopefully, Kristian Fulton will come back. Kristian Fulton has not played a full season of NFL football in his career. So a guy like Conner is really going to be pushing for more playing time, and I think he'll get it. The number 4 name here is Jaylen Royals, a big winner in training camp thus far. You have Jaylen Royals with an RAS of 9.01, 6 feet tall, which isn't a great number, but it's certainly big enough to play wide receiver in the NFL. 205 pounds, he is built like a running back. 13 reps on the bench press, scores a 5.52 out of 10 for the wide receiver position. A 36-inch vertical isn't great. A 10-foot 1-inch broad jump isn't great, but together they're pretty good scores. He had a 4.42 officially timed 40-yard dash, which scores 9.17 out of 10. His 20-yard split was a 2.56, and his 10-yard split was a 1.53. All of those fall into the elite category. A 4.25 short shuttle and a 6.94 three-cone drill are good numbers, but not all that impressive. Again, these numbers are often sort of skewed because if you are going to run a poor shuttle number, you just don't run it, meaning that the only numbers that exist are the guys who are going to do pretty well. Those numbers are relied on heavily for scouting purposes. So Royals has had his share of targets in camp so far, and he is making the most of them. I think he may be impressing the coaching staff and Patrick Mahomes, not just with his abilities, but with his speed. I think that he is a deceptively fast wide receiver who I don't think you really realize it until you're on the field with him. I think that is what the coaching staff and Patrick Mahomes are realizing, that speed was not just showing out against smaller school competition. That speed was real, and it will translate to the NFL. The Rice suspension looms large for this team, but they have the guy who is going to step into that role and get better through baptism by fire early in the year and be ready for the postseason, the way that Xavier Worthy and the aforementioned Rashee Rice were before him. So this wide receiver core is really rounding out nicely for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think we're going to see a return to form for Patrick Mahomes, where he is not just throwing for 3,900 yards, not even just throwing for 4,000 yards. I think this could be another 5,000-yard season for the quarterback. Wide receivers have to know every spot in Andy Reid's offense, and Royals is a guy who won't just know them. He has the size and the speed to be able to execute at every spot, and he's going to be counted on to do so. He is going to be on the field a lot for the Chiefs, even once Rashee Rice returns from suspension, and I think, which Kay Wayne says will last until the 2030s, but I think that he's going to end up being the number 3 wide receiver sooner than not. I think that Hollywood Brown, who's also having a good camp, will see his role sort of diminish as the season goes on, as Jaylen Royals emerges, and he could be a long-term solution for the Kansas City Chiefs, who, I mean, by the way, look at this. Drafted Rashee Rice, drafted Xavier Worthy, drafted Jaylen Royals. Jaylen Royals going to be the biggest value in that group of drafted wide receivers for the Kansas City Chiefs, as he was a 4th-round pick, not a 1st or 2nd-round pick. And that is how this team gets rebuilt, restocked, reshelved. The number 5 guy on this list is Jake Brenningstool, the tight end out of Clemson, added as a UDFA. Not an impressive RAS with a 6.29 score. Not elite anywhere except for his 6'5.5" height. But he does have good enough numbers pretty much everywhere. That 31-inch vertical is maybe concerning, but he does look like he can jump on the field. If you look at those plays he made at Clemson, some of them were in the air, and I think he may have just not tested well. 4.75 40-yard dash isn't great either, but it scores a 7.11 out of 10. It is good enough. I don't think he's going to be counted on to be a deep threat for the Kansas City Chiefs. I think the 10-yard split of 1.66 and the 20-yard split of 2.77, though they are not as impressive, both being in the 6s as opposed to the 7s, are going to be more telling for this player. This is a quote from Arrowhead Pride. Reid also discussed undrafted rookie tight end Jake Brenningstool, who he noted was a draft favorite of general manager Brett Veach. Brett gets the credit for that one, Reid recalled. He loved them and loved what he saw. And so far, the kid has done a nice job. Again, let's see how he does when things get going, but he's working in there. It looks like the quarterbacks trust him. They're throwing it to him, so it's positive. That is a good sign this early in camp to have the quarterbacks trusting him. Brenningstool fell through the draft, and the Chiefs snagged him up as UDFA, but UDFA are given opportunities in Kansas City. And I fully believe that Brenningstool will get his opportunity to shine. The Chiefs love to have 4 tight ends on the roster, but that 3rd and 4th spot have been rotational guys the past few seasons, bringing guys in who showed some promise in one area or another, and they just haven't stuck. With Wiley and Brenningstool in those 3rd and 4th spots, I think they have the whole tight end depth chart figured out, at least until Travis Kelce decides he wants to be a full-time actor/model. Then the number 6 guy on this list is Joshua Simmons. You have him with not much of an RAS. He didn't do any testing except for the bench press, where he did show out with 34 reps, scoring a 9.83 out of 10. He's basically 6'5", 317. Those are both good numbers for an offensive tackle. You see that with a 3.28, but that's because a lot of guys are 6'5". Not as many are 6'6". There are some 6'7" and 6'8" monsters that really sort of wash these numbers out. He has, Josh Simmons, been the starter at left tackle every day in camp so far. And by the way, he's not even wearing a knee brace. This guy is ready for the regular season, and that is promising. This is a guy that fell in the draft, would have been a top 10 pick, but for injury concerns, and it looks like those concerns were not well-founded. Though it would surprise me to see him, that would not surprise me, to see him held out tomorrow, the first fully padded practice of camp, just as a precaution if he is on the field, if he is not wearing a knee brace, if he is fully padded up, if he is starting at left tackle tomorrow, we will have something very, very promising to go on. And it's really starting to look like this is the future of the offensive line. The left tackle position figured out, nailed down by Josh Simmons. Trey Smith is locked up for 4 more years. Simmons is on a 4 or 5 year contract, depending on if they pick up that option rather than just extending him. I think they're probably going to extend him if he is the answer at left tackle. Why let that go to chance? Creed is signed through 2028. Creed Humphrey, the center, obviously, 2028. Kingsley Suamataia is signed through 2027. The right tackle spot is the only place on this line that is not nailed down long-term. It would not shock me to see the Chiefs invest another first-round pick at tackle in order to get the line completely figured out and nailed down, but it would mean that someone had to fall to them for one reason or another. And guys, I think this is going to be the future of the draft in Kansas City, is just those unsexy positions like right tackle, where the Chiefs can get a cheap full-time starter through a rookie contract. Speaking of right tackle, the number 7 name on this list is Jaylon Moore, a 7.49 RAS score with 11-inch hands and 33 3/8-inch arms. Very impressive, an impressive athlete. 6'4" and 1/10 inches is not a great score, but it's good enough, especially when you're adding it to 33+ inch arms, 11-inch hands, 27 reps on the bench press is an 8.31 out of 10 score. You see that listed weight there at 311. It would not shock me if the Chiefs want him to get a little bit heavier, but I don't think it would affect his athleticism. A 30.5-inch vertical leap is an elite number for an offensive lineman. An 8.47 score out of 10. 8-foot 10-inch broad jump. You have a 5.25 40-yard dash, which is not the best, but it's certainly serviceable. You have a 1.82 10-yard split, a 6.35 out of 10 score. This is going to help his mobility if he is counted on to pull. 4.63 short shuttle, 7.77 3-cone drill. With Jawaan Taylor being out, Moore has been starting at right tackle every day, and if he proves he has the versatility to really play right tackle, it would not surprise me if we see him overtake Jawaan Taylor, who has been good in pass protection, but who has been a liability in the running game and before the snap. We know those struggles very well here in Kansas City. His very first start as a Kansas City Chief, he drew the ire of fans around the league and apparently the officiating crews as well. But he might be donezo as far as what it means to be starting at right tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs. Taylor is probably gone at the season's conclusion, whether he retakes his starting right tackle spot or not. So if Moore can nail this down, not only does he stand the chance to start this season, but also next season. Moore has never been a full-time starter, so he will be motivated, because if he can become that full-time starter in 2025 and 2026 for the Kansas City Chiefs, he could be setting himself up for a really good payday in 2027. The next name on this list is Omarr Norman-Lott, the second-round defensive tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs. 10 and 3/4 inch hands, a 33 and 3/4 inch arm length. He's only 6'1" 7/10", only 291 pounds, though reports are that he is up to 315 pounds now. And if he is 315 and he keeps his athleticism, that is going to be dangerous for opposing offenses. He has a 31.5-inch vert, a 9'5" broad jump, both elite numbers for a defensive tackle. Those are the explosive numbers. That's what allows him to get off the ball. That is what has that first step looking so good for Omarr Norman-Lott. A 5.15 40-yard dash, scores 5.31 out of 10. Not great, but he's a defensive tackle. If he's having to run 40 yards, something has already broken down. Perhaps more troubling is the 1.79 10-yard split, especially for a guy who has proven himself to be so explosive. That scores 4.92 out of 10, but he does not show that on the field. Now, here is a picture of Omarr Norman-Lott, and the reason I got this is because, one, this looks like a mugshot, and I love that for a defensive tackle. Number two, you can see that his neck is approximately 1.25 times the width of his head. His neck sticks out just as far as his ears, and that is something I also like for a defensive tackle. But number three, when I was a kid, I loved football cards. And I had some from the 70s, I had some from the 80s, I had some from the 90s. One thing that struck me as I got older is the fact that these guys were 25, 26, 27, but they looked 48 years old. Omarr Norman, and recently they have stopped looking quite so old, and I always wondered, is that because I am now older than these NFL prospects, or is there something else going on there? Now I realize maybe there was a little bit of something else going on there, because Omarr Norman-Lott looks like a 48-year-old man, and that's promising, I think. I think that is a good thing for this defense. Now let's get into why he's on this list. He's been rotating in with the ones, and I think he will be a full-time starter by week 4. If he isn't leading into the season, if he's not already a full-time starter in week 1, snap 1. The pads come on tomorrow, and I think that is where OML will shine. OML will turn into OMG as he is smacking these offensive linemen, these big interior offensive linemen for the Chiefs around. If he is able to shine in a first fully padded practice against the monsters that the Chiefs have on the interior of their offensive line, then it will be a very promising start to his rookie season. He's going to let Mike Pennel be a part-time guy, which is what Pennel needs, and frankly what the team needs, to have that 34-year-old defensive tackle fresh in the playoffs. Let him not have to be the full-time guy, and the Chiefs will benefit from it. Number 9 on this list is Kareem Hunt, going way back for this RAS score, a 5.15. But we have seen that Kareem Hunt is a much better athlete than that. What really dragged him down was the 40-yard dash, 4.62, which scores 4.54. And his shuttle numbers, the short shuttle of 4.53, scores a 1.1 out of 10, and a 3-cone drill of 7.22 scores just 3.15 out of 10. But this is a veritable test case for why these numbers are not the be-all, end-all. He will have a full training camp this year, which should have him in the shape he needs to have more pop and durability than he had last season. He got a little bit wore down last season, and I don't think we're going to see that from him this year, as last year he was coming off the couch to the Kansas City Chiefs in the early season. He won't have to carry the full load this season either. And having Kareem in a more limited capacity will allow him to keep his average per carry up. That is what made him so dangerous in his first go-round with the Chiefs and early on in his tenure last year. He looks like he could also be back in the shape necessary to be a menace receiving out of the backfield. And that's where he was a real difference maker with the Kansas City Chiefs in his first go-round, not with the Chiefs, but with Patrick Mahomes, receiving out of the backfield and being a terror downfield, which is something you would not assume from those testing numbers. Now, those are the first 9 promising names on this list, but it might be the 10th name that, if it's not quite as promising, it is the most reassuring, and that is Kingsley Suamataia. As we look at this RAS, it is worth keeping in mind that this is in comparison to offensive tackles, guys who are normally have more physical prowess. So this being a 9.4 as an RAS score for offensive tackles, it would probably be closer to 10 if this were for offensive guards. Now, no agility testing, though I think Kingsley probably would have done fairly well for himself in agility testing. But 6'4" and a half on height, not the greatest for an offensive tackle, but is pretty good for an offensive guard. 326 pounds might be a little lighter than offensive guard, right? So that 8.59 might be lower for offensive guard, but 31 bench press reps is good no matter where you're playing on the line. 10 and 6/8 inch hands, 34 and a quarter inch arms. A 28-inch vertical is a pretty good number, actually. A 9'2" broad jump scores an 8.69 out of 10 at offensive tackle. 5.04 40-yard dash is a 9.1 score. His 10-yard split of 1.73 scores 9.26. He will be able to pull from the offensive guard position. He is an athlete at the offensive line positions in general. There has nary been a jot nor a tittle of Kingsley Suamataia failing at offensive guard thus far in camp, and that is a win in my book. The pads have not gone on yet, and in reality, that is where a guy like Kingsley should excel. Nearly 6'5" with 34.5-inch arms, 31 reps on the bench press, and 326 pounds. You have him teaming with Creed and Trey on the interior, and the Chiefs could be very hard to stop on 3rd and 1. How many 3rd and 1 attempts will Patrick Mahomes have to absolutely annihilate the defense with a bomb to Xavier Worthy? That is something to keep an eye on, because everyone is going to be in the box and trying to stop Kareem Hunt. But you have that cannon of an arm on Patrick Mahomes to still sail the ball down the field. He's not going to be Joe Thuney in pass protection, but if Simmons lives up to the hype at that left tackle position, Kingsley Suamataia at left guard probably won't have to be Joe Thuney in order for this offense to absolutely excel. Now, those are the 10 names that I have from the first 3 days of training camp for the Kansas City Chiefs. Who are your 10 names? Who is your number one standout? The problem for me with this list was that it was so easy to pick 10 names. And I don't think that's particularly normal. Previous years, there have been a few names that stood out through the first 3-ish days of camp. But this list is extensive, and I think it is promising for the Kansas City Chiefs that so many players are excelling so early in camp, or at least look so good early in camp. We will see how things look tomorrow when the pads come on, as popping really starts. But as the Chiefs take their first day off in camp, things are looking very promising for the season. The Chiefs have been to 3 consecutive Super Bowls. Will they get to a 4th? This first 3 days of camp suggest that they just might. It is strange that a dynasty in this stage, remember, they've been to 7 consecutive AFC Championship games for 7 years. 7 years consecutive, the Chiefs have been to the AFC Championship game. Their shortest season has been overtime in the AFC Championship game. For this team to be perhaps looking better than ever it has, to be looking more explosive than ever it has, is something that I think is going to draw the ire of fan bases around the league who are tired of dynasties, having just come off of the Patriots dynasty and walked right into the Kansas City Chiefs dynasty. Overall thoughts through the first 3 days of camp is that with the exception of, or first 4 days, I guess it is, with the exception of that 4th day, which was closed to the public, closed to the public due to weather, things look good. Apparently, it was a bit of a sloppy practice yesterday, and I guess that's to be expected so early. I guess that's probably to be expected with the weather, but it's something that all teams are going to have to contend with. On balance, I think that this team is looking the most promising early of any Chiefs team that we have seen. I've been running this channel for 5 years now. I don't remember ever having so few questions coming out of camp so early. And obviously, one of the things that is sort of a double-edged sword with training camp is that for every Kansas City Chief who looks good, there's obviously a Kansas City Chief on the other end of things who got had, right? So all of these deep bombs to Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown, which it was hard to keep Hollywood Brown off this list, was for every bomb to one of those receivers, there is a defensive back on the other end of things that got had for a bomb in an NFL setting. Not an NFL game, but an NFL setting. I do think that this coaching staff is going to be hard-pressed on cutdown day because there are so many players that are NFL caliber on this team. I think that the wide receiver and defensive back groups in particular are going to be difficult to really parse out. I think that someone like Joshua Williams, who has a lot of experience in the NFL, who has a lot of snaps under his belt, I don't think he makes the team. And you're hoping you can trade that in for a draft pick. You're hoping you can trade that in for something in the trade market. But I don't think you wait until late in the preseason to do that, because as free agents flood the market after cutdown day, there will be other options available. So it might be in the next week or two that we might see some names move. That would be kind of shocking because it doesn't often happen this early in training camp. But guys, it might be time. If you have all of these players at the defensive back positions and you have someone like Joshua Williams who has value, there are teams across the league that want that now, want that to work in prior to the regular season starting, want a player to know their system. I think this is while the iron is hot. So if Brett Veach can pull off a trade or two earlier, the better, in my opinion. But again, who are your 10 names that have shined in camp so far? Who is your number one winner through the first week of training camp before padded practices start? That is all I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting a like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other Kansas City Chiefs fans. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, the Chiefs are the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every single week. We have been over about 2.5 years now of daily uploads. So consider hitting the subscribe button, stick around for more, and as always, I hope to have you back for the next one.